The scorching sun rained down on Prince Zannanza of the Hittite Empire as he journeyed across the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Egyptian desert. But Zannanza was unbothered by the heat, for at the end of this journey, he was set to marry Egyptian queen Ankhesenamun, crowning him pharaoh and the leader of the most powerful empire on the planet. This was his destiny. And yet, history had other plans. Prince Zannanza would never make it to Egypt. Somewhere along his path of greatness, he vanished. Although there are theories of his demise, he is now just a name. He was supposed to be worshipped, but instead, the name Zannanza never appears in the historical record again. His legacy is not one of triumph, but one of mystery. Instead of the sculpture of his father, I wanted to include an image of Zannanza's likeness, but it simply doesn't exist. No sculptures, no inscriptions, no paintings, nothing. This is the tale of the prince who is erased from history. 1323. A day of mourning hangs heavy over Egypt. The reign of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, or King Tut as he's come to be known, has come to an abrupt and tragic end, his life cut short at just 19 years old. Yet, as the nation grieves, his queen and sister, Ankhesenamun, faces an even greater crisis. Despite two births, they don't have a living child. King Tut has no successor. Once she was queen to her father, then she was queen to her brother. She was not gonna lose the throne now, but with no heir, she faced an impossible choice. But she did have an impossible plan, a plan that would lead to one of the world's first and oldest unsolved murder cases, a plan forgotten by time for thousands of years. In 1931, Emil Forer, a Swiss Assyriologist and a pioneer in the study of the Hittite Empire, made a breakthrough. Emil assembled the surviving remnants of a 3,000-year-old writing that went into grave detail about the rule of the Hittite king Suppiluliuma. This writing gives us a true peek back in time. Written by his son Mursili, it tells of his warmongering, his diplomacy, and his triumphs. But within these accounts of war, there was something unexpected. The writings tell of when the king received a letter, an utterly unexpected plea from an utterly unexpected writer, Ankhesenamun. It read, "My husband died, a son I have not, but to thee they say the sons are many. If thou wouldest give me one son of thine, he would become my husband. Never shall I pick out a servant of mine and make him my husband. I am afraid." To Suppiluliuma, the request seemed far too bold to be sincere. Diplomatic marriages were commonplace in Egypt, but never like this. Pharaohs married many a foreign princess, but never had a queen initiated such an offer. Never had Egypt extended the role of god king to a foreigner. And if for some reason they were going to offer it to anyone, it certainly would not be the Hittites. Egypt and the Hittites were by no means allies. They were rival superpowers locked into constant conflict. In fact, when the Hittite king received this letter, he was in the midst of laying siege to one of Egypt's own allies in northern Syria. Suppiluliuma dismissed the proposal outright, and is quoted as saying, "Nothing like this has happened to me in my entire life. Go and bring thou the true word back to me. Maybe they deceive me. Maybe in fact they do have a son of their lord." He immediately dispatched a delegation to Egypt, carrying that pointed message. Ankhesenamun was furious. Young though she was still queen, and she demanded to be treated as such. But more than that, she was desperate. She needed this alliance to happen. "Why didst thou say they deceive me in that way? Had I a son, would I have written about my own and my country's shame to a foreign land? Thou didst not believe me, and hast even spoken thus to me. He who was my husband has died, a son I have not. Never shall I take a servant of mine and make him my husband. I have written to no other country, only to thee have I written. They say thy sons are many, so give me one son of thine. To me he will be husband, but in Egypt he will be king." This response had been a bit more convincing, but Suppiluliuma wasn't ready to surrender his suspicions just yet. He told the Egyptian messenger, "You keep asking me for a son of mine as if it were my duty. He will in some way become a hostage, but king, you will not make him." He did not trust her motives, but the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. This alliance would bind two of the greatest superpowers of the time. His family would hold unmatched power over the region. And, as she pointed out, he had sons to spare. So the decision was made. Zannanza departed for Egypt. History had already decided Zannanza's fate. His father's decision cemented it. The Hittites waited to hear from their newly crowned pharaoh. They waited and waited, but no word came from Zannanza. When the Hittite delegation that was sent in the wake of the silence arrived in Egypt, they found a new pharaoh already on the throne. That pharaoh was not Zannanza. It was a man named Ankhesenamun's grandfather, a man without royal blood, elected by the Egyptian courts in the wake of Zannanza's disappearance. The delegation returned to their king with a single message: Zannanza is dead. Suppiluliuma's grief boiled into fury. "Oh gods, I did no evil, yet the people of Egypt did this to me, and they also attacked the frontier of my country. His son was taken from him and betrayed. Egypt would pay for his blood." Blaming the new pharaoh for Zannanza's death, Suppiluliuma launched a brutal military campaign into Syria. The Hittite army, far stronger than Egypt's, carved a path of destruction across the land. Egyptian vassals were crushed, villages were burned, and thousands were taken prisoner. Newly crowned, knew that Egypt was in danger. His first act as pharaoh was an attempt at diplomacy, a desperate effort to salvage relations with the Hittites and defend his reputation. Though most of his letter to the Hittite king is lost to time, one message remains: "Your accusations have no justification. You are simply spoiling for a fight against me. I seek peace and brotherhood with you. As for your son's death, of that I am entirely innocent." But Suppiluliuma did not want peace. He wanted vengeance. A prince has been vanished from time. A throne has been stolen and a war has been waged. What really happened to Zannanza? It's time for... One name rises far above the rest. On paper, he is the obvious culprit. He gained the most out of the murder and is the man Suppiluliuma directly blames for his son's murder. If you had the power and status to become pharaoh, why wouldn't you kill your only competition? Was a respected figure in Egypt's upper class. He had a distinguished military career as overseer of all the king's horses, the equivalent of a modern-day colonel. He also served as Grand Vizier under King Tut, and given the young pharaoh's age, likely made many of Egypt's decisions himself, even before he was pharaoh. With the royal courts behind him, was all but guaranteed the throne. There was only one thing that stood in his way: Ankhesenamun. She clearly did not want to marry him. In fact, she clearly did not want to marry anyone within Egypt. That's the only way that it makes sense for her to reach out to the Hittites and marry one of their own. So with Zannanza out of the way, well, the rest is history. But, admittedly, as an outside observer thousands of years later, I personally don't believe that this is the full story. There were much easier ways for to ascend to the throne than by murdering Zannanza, ways that he would end up taking anyways. No, Ankhesenamun did not want to marry him, but in the end, he ended up usurping the entire power structure of Egypt and becoming pharaoh anyways. Ankhesenamun's hands were tied. So if you're and you want to etch your name into the history books, why kill the son of your most powerful rival in the region, which could and did lead to an incredibly violent war, making his short stint as pharaoh incredibly bloody and difficult, when you could have just sent Zannanza home, avoided this entire war? And although Zannanza is who Ankhesenamun chose to be the new pharaoh of Egypt, it's not like she had any say in her inevitable fate. Held all the power. Despite that power, was not the only person with a claim to the throne. In fact, just because King Tut did not have an heir, that does not mean he did not have a successor. This is where I'm going to introduce you to a new name in this story. The name of a man that is going to hold great consequence over the terrible fate of every single person in this story thus far. The name of the man that was the legitimate successor to the throne, a man named Horemheb. He held the title of Deputy of the Lord of the Two Lands, making him first in line to the throne in the event that King Tut had no child. He knew that the throne was meant to be his, and yet Ankhesenamun did not want to grant him that power. Horemheb did not have the social status to usurp the throne through the courts like did. We know who ends up on the throne in the end. But he did have one thing. He was the top general in the Egyptian army. It would have been trivial to order an ambush on Zannanza without anyone in the Egyptian upper class even knowing. And with him out of the way, he would take his rightful place as pharaoh. But, as we know, that does not happen. It is unknown how was able to take the throne from Horemheb, but we do know that Horemheb got the last laugh in the end. Hormorheb will become Pharaoh. He will oversee the fall of Suppiluliuma, and he will erase A from the historical record, just like what happened to Zannanza. But that is a tale for later in this story. For now, we're still talking about what happened to Zannanza. And while A and Hormorheb are the two named suspects, I have some other theories I would like to put forward to you. A and Hormorheb were far from the only people in Egypt that would have a vested interest in killing Zannanza. His assassination wouldn't have required a single mastermind. There were many who had the motive, many who had the means. Countless names lost to time. Silent players in Egypt's power structure could have seen the arrival of a foreign prince as a direct threat. This marriage proposal wasn't just a political arrangement. It was a seismic shift. It meant surrendering control to an outsider. It meant handing the throne to a man from one of Egypt's greatest rivals. And for the ruling elite, that idea would have been unthinkable. A foreign king could reshape the government, restructure alliances, dismantle the existing order. Just because you hold power today doesn't mean you'll hold it tomorrow. And for some, that was a risk that could have been worth killing for. And this is assuming that the people that killed Zannanza were from Egypt. For centuries, Egypt and the Hittites had dominated the region, controlling vast territories and countless vassal states. But their influence came at a cost. Many of these subjected nations had long yearned for independence. And for these nations, Zannanza, chosen as Egypt's next pharaoh, posed an entirely new threat. For those already under their control, resistance would be futile, and for the few nations that had managed to avoid domination altogether, survival would become nearly impossible. If two of the largest militaries on the planet decided to stop fighting each other and instead turn their sights outward, there would be nowhere to run. With tensions already high, a well-calculated assassination, one that framed Egypt, could have been enough to tip the scales into full-blown war. And as it turns out, that is exactly what ended up happening. The Hittites had been attacking Egyptian allies in Syria, but not Egypt itself. And then, Zannanza died, and Suppiluliuma launched war against Egypt. But sometimes history isn't shaped by grand conspiracies. Not every motive had to be calculated. Not every assassination had to be strategic. Some enemies of the Hittites may have seen an opportunity and simply taken it. Zannanza wasn't traveling through neutral territory. His path led him straight through Syria, land controlled by Egypt and its allies. The Hittites were actively besieging cities and nations he was traveling through, and for those who already hated the empire, seeing a Hittite prince traveling through their territory may have been all the justification they needed. No conspiracy, no politics, just an ambush. Now, I have one more theory that I'd like to put forward to you, and just cards on the table, I personally have some problems with this theory, but I think that it's important for me to at least mention it, even if I think that there's some issues with it. And that theory is, what if Zannanza never actually died? Realistically, the only evidence that has survived of Zannanza's death is the word of Egypt and Suppiluliuma's letters back to Egypt in response to Zannanza's death. There is no body, no burial, no confirmation besides words on a page. It is entirely possible that Zannanza never actually wanted to rule Egypt. Could the prince have abandoned his destiny, fading into a simpler life? A soldier, a farmer, a wanderer in a faraway land? Perhaps, rather than being erased by history, Zannanza erased himself. But like I said, I personally have some problems with this. It's obviously entirely possible, and we have no way of knowing. But in a mystery this old, where we're so lucky to have such strong evidence, where we not only have writings of the exact timeline of what happened, but direct quotes from the letters that the people involved wrote to each other, I think that it's kind of foolish to ignore the evidence that we have and speculate on something that is against the evidence we were given. While the only evidence we have is writing between Egypt and Suppiluliuma is very confident in his letters that his son is dead. Now, would Suppiluliuma be so confident in his writing to the people he is directly accusing of killing his son if he did not have further proof of Zannanza's death? Well, there's obviously no way of knowing. But I do think his confidence in his letters to Egypt is very strong evidence that Zannanza actually died. Additionally, while I am no professional historian, when I was researching the deeds of Suppiluliuma and the other writings about his life, there's a lot of sections that were either destroyed over time or missing, that have just been lost to the sands of time. And it seems pretty clear to me that there are sections of these writings that did not survive, that contained more evidence of Zannanza's death, or even writings about who killed Zannanza without any mystery at all. And while it is certainly possible that Zannanza never actually was assassinated, it's a theory that I personally just don't buy into, and I don't think the evidence supports. But that's kind of the fun thing with an ancient mystery like this. Until new evidence is discovered, all we can do is speculate. So speculate away. If you have anything that I haven't covered, or if you want to let me know which theory you personally believe, please let me know. One thing that we do know for a fact is that Zannanza was far from the only victim in this story. In a cruel twist of fate, Ankhesenamun and her new husband A both suffered an eerily similar fate to Zannanza. They too would be erased from history, or at least attempted to. Ankhesenamun's desperate bid to remain in power failed. She was briefly her grandfather's queen, but after his sudden death, her name disappears from the historical record. Just like her hopeful husband, her fate too is entirely lost to time. Not to appear again until the modern day, where a handful of mummies found near King Tut in the Valley of Kings were proposed to be hers, although the DNA testing is unconclusive. As for A, his stint as pharaoh was short-lived. I mean, he was already around 70 years old when he took the throne. His reign only lasted around 4 to 9 years, but most of his reign, including how long it lasted, is a bit of a mystery in of itself. But not because of his age, but because of what happened after. A had already maneuvered his way past Horemheb once, claiming the throne despite Horemheb's position as the rightful heir. And even after his death, he still tried to do it one last time by appointing someone else as his successor. Nachtman, a general, a subordinate of Horemheb, and now A's chosen heir. He granted Nachtman with the titles of Crown Prince and King's Son, ensuring that he, not Horemheb, would inherit Egypt. But Horemheb did not take this lightly. It is unknown how, but Horemheb was able to usurp the throne from Nachtman, just like A was able to do to him, and became the final pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Horemheb sought revenge from the pharaohs that came before him. He tore down monuments erected for King Tut and his father, and while he respected their final resting place in the Valley of Kings, in his eyes, A did not deserve the same respect. He sought to force history's hand. He would do to A what history was to do to Zannanza. He ordered the desecration of A's tomb and the destruction of his sarcophagus and his cartouches. He found any inscription or depiction of A in the Valley of Kings and erased them. He wanted to make history forget A. But history doesn't listen. Miraculously, the cover of his sarcophagus and a full cartouche were found unharmed and intact. Horemheb had failed. As for the Hittites, they paid a heavy price for Suppiluliuma's rage. In their records, a chilling tablet known as Plague Prayers recounts the aftermath of Zannanza's death. My father sent foot soldiers and charioteers who attacked the country of Ankha, Egyptian territory. Again he sent troops, and again he attacked it. When the Egyptians became frightened, they asked outright for one of his sons to take over the kingship. But when my father gave them one of his sons, they killed him as they led him there. My father let his anger run away from him. He went to war against Egypt, and attacked Egypt. Blinded by fury, Suppiluliuma unleashed war upon Egypt. He captured thousands of prisoners, but he also captured something much worse. A plague. Possibly rabbit fever. A plague that not only ravaged his people, but would eventually kill Suppiluliuma himself. And when his eldest son took the throne, the plague took his life as well. Suppiluliuma never trusted Ankhesenamun's offer, and he was right. Just a few years later, and he and 2 of his sons would fall victim to the decision he never thought he would have to make. There are no lessons here, only uncertainty. A mystery preserved through ancient records, yet forever incomplete. Zannanza was meant to bring peace, but instead his death shattered 2 dynasties, and in the end, he disappeared. Just another name buried beneath the sands of history. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. This is my first video on this channel. I put a lot of effort into it. If you liked the video, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed and did the whole YouTube thing. I appreciate you watching.